This is Layton Howerton with a special weekend edition of Highlights. Barns. You smell that? Ain't nothing like an old wood barn, so go ahead, get you a big old lungful of that with me. Man, oh man, ain't nothing smells as sweet as an old wood barn. Hay in the loft, cattle in their stalls, feed in the pans, corn in the crib, leather in the tack room, tobacco in a stripping room where I come from. Man, that smells good. Smells like farm living is the life for me. Come on, you know the rest of that tune. A barn never sleeps. Field mouse in the corner, king snake is slipping in, old tomcat over there on the prowl. Rooster a crowing, barn owl up there in the rafters, Jersey cow a chewing her cud, wasp on a nest, charlotte in her web, early morning sunlight filtering into the cracks. Ever seen that? Man, just look at all that dust. Barns, built to last, made to stand longer than most houses. Now, my grandpa had three. He had a cow barn, a tool barn for his implements, and his big barn. Boy, that's the barn that I like, that I can remember the best. It had big shutters on the sides that opened and closed for curing tobacco that we'd hung inside it. The big barn, well, it had a little bit of everything in it, but mostly it housed the good stuff. It was always the center of activity on the farm and where my grandfather kept his favorite and most prized possessions, like his farmall, an old red International Super A McCormick tractor, and a green GMC flatbed truck complete with cattle racks that my Uncle Bill, who worked at a Chevrolet dealership, had restored for him. He kept some old leather harnesses and tack around too from the old days that had been passed down to him from his father when they worked the fields behind a mule. And yes, a twist or two of his own homegrown Kentucky burley tobacco that he'd occasionally chew that would drip down the side of his cheek, good Baptist deacon that he was. Barns. I miss those old wood barns. They're disappearing, you know. And when I die, don't scatter my ashes to the four winds, and please don't bury me in some out-of-the-way forgotten graveyard or write some fancy words about me on any old tombstone. Just put my ashes in an old blue mason jar and set me up on some dusty shelf in an old barn amongst the rust and velvet and Prince Albert cans that are filled with nails and screws, skeleton keys and glass doorknobs, and old lost tractor parts, so that when some other curious and adventurous youngster is exploring his grandpa's barn, why, he'll pick me up and say to himself, "Now I wonder what this is," and then proceed to pour me out and use the jar to catch fireflies in. So folks, honor the Lord with your substance and with the first fruits of all your increase. If you do this, well, then you can count on the promise, and the promise is this: those barns that you have, well, they shall be filled with plenty. And those wine presses, well, they will burst out with new, wonderful tasting wine, or Welch's, depending on your denominational preference. This is Layton Howerton encouraging you to look for the highlights along the way.